Hello and welcome to today's webinar. This is a Getting Started with Duo event, a special demo event. You all are here because we invited you from one of the past events where you indicated that you'd like more information about the Duo security event. So thank you for your interest and thank you for joining us on today's special demo webinar. This is intended to be roughly a 30-minute event, and we are just going to jump really quickly into it after I have just a couple slides here of introduction. So my name is David Davis of Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator on today's event. We want this to be a very educational event. Obviously, it's all around demo. It's all around Duo security, multi-factor authentication, zero trust, all those things. And we want you to get your questions answered. So we encourage you to use the questions and answers box there in the GoToWebinar control panel. We have an expert who I'm about to introduce here in just a minute from Duo Security, who will be doing a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the event, where I'll be asking the best questions that you have submitted through the GoToWebinar questions and answers box. So feel free to use that during the event, during the demo, and we'll be answering the best questions at the end. And without further delay, I'm excited to introduce today's presenter. That is Zoe Lindsey, Security Strategist at Duo. Zoe, thank you so much for being on the event today.
Hey, how you doing?
It's great to have you on. I love these like short, fast-paced demo events, so I'm excited to see what you have lined up for us today. I'm going to go ahead and transfer control over to you.
Great. Let's see here. Everybody able to see my screen?
I can, yes, take it away.
Awesome, excellent. Hey everybody, thanks so much for joining today. So my understanding is that you joined one of our earlier webinars where we were very much talking about philosophy and method more so than nuts and bolts. Today we're going to dive right into the nuts and bolts here. So let me just go ahead and skip forward. So today we are going to be talking about the authentication methods that Duo supports, the end user experience, including self-remediation, what advanced device insight is, and how it figures into your security posture. We're going to go through configuring an application, including policy and control settings at a granular level, enrolling users, and question and answer, all in half an hour. So I'm gonna try and speed through some of this as quick as I can, but please do add any questions that you have. I wanna make sure that we can get through as many of those as possible. So this means today that I'm pretty much exclusively gonna be talking about nuts and bolts. I will try and include a little bit about why we try and follow these best practices, but I would encourage you, if you have more questions about why Duo goes about doing some of the implementation steps that we do, I'm happy to answer those either in Q&A or in follow-up. One of the things that Duo really wants to do is make sure that we are providing universal visibility and control. And the foundation of that is making sure that every user has a way that they are able to authenticate. So along with giving you the policy tools to restrict these to only the factors that you want to allow for your environment, we do allow a wide variety of methods for authentication. By far the most popular of those methods would be push. You can see a screen cap of that here to the right of that little chart. That is an interactive authentication method that goes out of band to a user's device, provides them with some contextual information, the organization name and logo, the user attempting to log in, the IP address that request is coming from, the time of the request, and the system being accessed. And based on that information, the user can either easily approve by pressing the green button or deny that authentication request by pressing the red button. It provides a higher level of convenience versus legacy methods like typing in a passcode, but also has some security benefits because it is going out of band and it's using a stronger encryption method rather than the shared seed secret that hardware tokens or soft tokens would work from. Push authentication is going to be a public-private encrypted communication. Along with push, because we know that while it'd be great, not every single user is going to have a smartphone, we are able to work through traditional telephony-based methods, SMS and phone callback. I will say that these have been depreciated as recommended methods. And so if you have limited use cases where you need them, they are available. But if you have options for stronger alternatives for your users that are viable in that use case, I'd encourage you to look at those. We support newer technologies like U2F and wearables, as well as biometric-based authentication through Face ID, Touch ID, or fingerprint scanners on Android, as well as, there are still some use cases where a hardware token may be the only viable method. So we do support those. You can either purchase directly from us and have those imported into your admin panel, or purchase from any vendor of your choice. And we have some tools to allow you to import them. Finally, I think I skipped over this. Push does require an internet connection, either cell or Wi-Fi data. However, if a user does not have any connectivity on their mobile device, there is also the option of a soft token authentication with a passcode generated in the app, like you see on the far right here. That will work even if the phone is in airplane mode. So now we're going to flip over to the fun stuff and get into a live demonstration here. So the first thing that I would like to show you actually is from the user's perspective, active or a live login into a resource. And we're actually going to go through this very quickly twice. The first time I'm going to enroll as a new user. So you get to see you can see what the process is for a new user using one of our enrollment options that can be leveraged, self-enrollment. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So when we're asking users to go through this process to add themselves as new users, we want to make sure that we're communicating clearly with them and letting them know what we're asking them to do. That starts with explaining what the process is that we're asking them to participate in. So here we're letting them know we just need to take a moment to add a device to help keep their account secure. And this enrollment process is contextual, which means every step along the way, what I am asked in subsequent screens is based on my previous responses. If I choose a landline here, it asks me for a phone number, and then it also gives me the option to add an extension. If I say that I'm going to use a WebAuthn through Touch ID integration on a MacBook, it's just going to bring up that prompt for me to enroll Touch ID. Whereas if I choose mobile phone, like I'm going to do here, it asks me for a phone number. And then since I said I have a mobile phone, it asks me whether this is a smartphone or a feature phone. I say I've got an iPhone, so now it shows me what app I'm going to search for, as well as what that app looks like in the App Store. And then once I've confirmed that I've downloaded that app, I get a QR code to scan, and a check mark appears to give me an interactive confirmation once that account has been scanned and added. Now, what's happening under the hood here, when I scan that QR code, the public key for this specific Duo integration is going to be used to generate a unique private key certificate on my device that's stored in the hardware security module and nowhere else, meaning I now have a device-specific authentication method, which in recent research between Berkeley and Google has been found to stop over 99 I want to say 5, but I think it may be higher than that, of automated account takeover attempts. Now that I've gone through, it shows my enrolled device. And this screen, that is my settings and devices screen, you'll see at the end of enrollment. And also if you would choose to enable access to a self-service portal for your users to make changes later on, I can go and I can nickname this device or reactivate Duo Mobile if I have the same phone number but get a new device itself. I can choose a default, and I can also go and add another backup device. As long as it matches your security policy, this is actually something that I would recommend because it gives you a strong alternative if a user leaves their primary authentication device at home. Let's take 2 scenarios. If I have a YubiKey enrolled as a backup auth device, and if I don't. If I have my phone enrolled and I don't have a backup device, now I'm either going to lose productivity by driving home to get my phone, or I'm going to lose productivity by generating a help desk ticket to regain access to my account. And in many cases, that access is going to be granted based on a help desk call or email, which means that we've now moved from the level of a strong authentication back to the level of a social engineering attack for the risk at that authentication. Whereas if I have a backup device, I can then actually go through and just do that login directly using my secondary device with no downtime whatsoever. So now that I've gone through, let's go back through and see what it looks like on a day-to-day basis. I've already enrolled my device. It asks me how I want to authenticate. I get that notification on my phone and I approve it. And now I'm logged in. So that process is really rapid for users. Let's take a step back and see what that looks like from the mobile device side. So here we've got Chris. Oh, now we got to zoom back out. Here we've got Chris going to log into Outlook. It's coming to this authentication page. Now Chris has a mobile phone as well as a YubiKey enrolled. We're going to send a push notification to that device. And now when he opens that device, he's going to get that contextual information, the company icon, the system that's being logged into, his user ID used for login, the time of that request and geolocation, and then the IP address of origin. So they can go here and they can deny this. If they didn't mean to start a login, maybe they are using a password manager that auto-filled their credentials, but they don't actually need to access the service, they can mark that it was a mistake. And that'll be noted in the logs, but it's not going to flag an alert. Or if they receive a request that they don't recognize, they can mark that as fraudulent. And that's going to go to your Duo administrators, giving them an immediate alert. Hey, Chris just reported potential fraud targeting his account on O365 from this IP address right now. So it's giving immediate visibility to your admin so that they can go through and work to remediate that in the process. Now I want to flip over and make the most of our time here, but very, very quickly, I want to show one more scenario. Let's talk self-remediation. So we're about to flip over into the admin panel and take a look at what is encompassed in device insight, going beyond just validating the user and allowing us to take a look at the health of devices that are being used to access our protected data. In that scenario, if the user has a device that is out of date, we want to provide that feedback back to them, and if possible, give them a way to remediate immediately. Again, avoiding that downtime and getting this fastest speed to security possible. So here you see that I'm going to log in again, and it shows me a little orange banner that says my browser is out of date. Now this orange banner means that I'm receiving just a warning. It is allowing me to go through and complete that authentication attempt. But before it actually goes through and logs me directly into that system, it is going, again, to let me know that my browser is out of date. The policy is that we use the most recent version. And then there's a link here directly to Mozilla's site that's going to tell me about how I go through doing an update. The converse of this would be if a device is so far out of date that it poses a risk, you can actually block that access. So now you're letting the user know, hey, I'm sorry, your device is so far out of date. We're not going to be allowed to, we're not going to be able to allow you access until you go and update that device. So let's flip over to the admin panel. So now we're moving from what a user sees to what an admin sees. Here's your dashboard that you'll see each time that you go to log in to your admin panel. Obviously, when logging in, you're going to be logging in with a strong second factor that you'll enroll when creating your account. The idea on this dashboard is that we want to give you a top-down view, an overview of the most important or changed data in your deployment so that you can quickly identify any anomalies. So here you see a visual representation. It looks like on our demo account here, we were doing a lot of failed authentication testing because you can see there are green hashes for any successful auths and a red mark for any failed auths. And this gives you a 48-hour overview. You can take a look and delve into anywhere that there's an unusual spike in authentications or anomalous amount of failed or abandoned authentication attempts. You also get a heads up on your user status, how many users are locked out, set to a bypass mode where they won't be challenged for two-factor or are enabled, as well as the total number of users, how many endpoints are in your environment, how many of those are out of date, total numbers of administrators, devices, and users enrolled, and a snapshot of your most recent authentications with all of that data that we were talking about we're going to collect when a user is going to log in, that they see in that push authentication request, the time, the result, the user, the application, the IP origin, etc. Now, in addition, you'll note that we're getting some device insight here. We're seeing the version of OS X that's installed, as well as the version of Chrome that they were using, and that this is not a trusted endpoint. It is not identified as a corporate managed device. This information is coming from our user insight, or a device insight rather, functionality. And this is a agentless approach to gathering some basic security hygiene information each time that a user goes to authenticate. We're leveraging tools that are already available so that we don't have any additional overhead or infrastructure required to gather this data, and we can make sure that it is being collected each and every time that a user goes to log into a protected application. That information is basic hygiene about the device, right? We want to, if we're looking at mobile devices, we want to know what the OS and version is. We want to see if that's an up-to-date patched version or if it's an older version that may be vulnerable to exploits that have since been updated. These are the exploits that attackers are likely to use at scale. We want to know if that device has been tampered with, if it's been rooted or jailbroken. You may have a subset of your user base that is able to have a tampered or jailbroken device. Maybe you have a research team that needs to conduct testing with those devices. You at least want to know about it, and odds are for your average user, this isn't something that you want to enable for access to protected data. So you get that visibility here. You also get information on whether that device has a screen lock, and specifically whether that screen lock is protected with a biometric factor, as well as whether disk encryption is enabled. We don't show that breakdown on iOS because disk encryption has been enabled by default ever since iOS 9. But since that is not standard across the board on Android, we do give you a breakdown here. On laptops and desktops, we're looking at much the same information: OS and version, browser and version, if you want to restrict the browsers that users can access protected resources with, you can do so as well. And if we scroll down, we see our sort of problem children, perennial problem children plugins, Flash and Java. We know that these frequently have severe CVE patches, updates that are available. And so we at least, if we want to still allow devices with these plugins enabled to log in, at the very least, we want to make sure that before we do so, we're keeping them up to date. So that's talking about visibility. Now let's talk about control. Well, first, before we can build policies to control access to an application, we're going to need to create that application itself. So here I'm going to go in and I'm going to make a new integration for an ASA. Now you can see here that our first couple of steps are actually getting called out for us in this little gray-blue banner at the top of the page. I'm actually going to skip all the way to the bottom here. I'm going to give this integration first a unique name. I cannot type today. Great, so we've got a unique name here. We can set some other integration level options, whether we want to allow users to add or remove devices later on after completing a strong authentication. The self-service portal obviously is not accessible until you complete authentication with a strong second factor. Again, that's part of the reason why there's value in having a backup option enrolled. You can choose whether usernames will be normalized across domains. So if you have multiple AD domains, you can choose whether a given user ID will be treated as distinct or universal across those domains. You can customize the voice greeting that users will receive with a phone callback, add notes for other admins, restrict access to specific groups or administrative units, and as well as the policy options that you'll see later, you can set specific allow lists for set host names. I'm going to save those changes, and now I'm going to go through and click on these links. So for every one of our integrations, this is going to be the first place that you'll go. You'll get that banner when you create a new integration. It's going to link you to our documentation page. In that page, you're going to get an overview. In most cases, you will get a step-by-step narrated walkthrough video, as well as a step-by-step annotated and screenshot walkthrough with sample data so that you can see what the input types will be throughout. At a high level, the integration process for most Duo integrations is going to look really similar and is going to come down to these keys that you see here under the details section. For each integration, you're going to see these three keys: your I key or integration key, your A key or API hostname, and your S key or secret key, which here you can see has been obscured. The exact method for how we will integrate for a given integration is going to change based on the easiest hooks available for that system. In the case of ASA hardware, it supports a custom secondary sign-in page. So we give you that sign-in page as a download, and then you go through, and in the configuration for those server groups where you'll add that secondary sign-in page, you're going to add these integration keys. You'll also see a flow of what a successful login should look like for that integration, a network diagram showing the full flow from the user initiating authentication to finally reaching that resource after primary and secondary authentication. And then for systems that have multiple configuration options, like for ASA, which you can configure through the command line as well, will include alternate or secondary configuration options. If you'd like to get an overview of all of the natively supported systems, as well as our general purpose integrations, documentation page is a great place to go for that. You can get high-level information about Duo and its functionality. And if you scroll down a little bit, you can see both our most common enterprise hardware and services that we see: Microsoft services, web-based services, IDP providers, a whole bunch of cloud services. Duo can be integrated with any SAML compatible service, but we do have step-by-step walkthroughs for the most common integrations so that you can see exactly what it'll look like. Then if you keep scrolling down, you'll see there's some other applications that are supported, as well as more general purpose integrations. The idea being, basically, if you have an interactive login, Duo wants to be able to help you protect that with a strong second factor. You've got SSH login, both through the command line and actually bringing up a interactive web prompt for the user. Your API information, so you can plug this into your homegrown applications, as well as some general purpose tools and guides for your users. So after we go through and do the actual integration, which in many cases will take 20 minutes or less, we then want to go and start building what our controls are going to be. That starts with the global policy. Now, there are existing integrations in this demo account, so it's already pre-filling what this global policy is. New user policy. This is how new users that have not previously been enrolled in Duo are going to be treated. You've got a couple of options here. You can deny, allow, or require enrollment. Require enrollment is the process that you saw during my live demo. As a new user going to log in for the first time after Duo has been enabled, it prompts me to enroll a device, but trusts me on first use, that's that tofu philosophy, and allows me access on that first login using just my primary credentials so that I can enroll that device. Every time thereafter, I will have to use that device to log in. The other options here would be allow or deny. Allow is a great tool if you have to test in production. This means that unless you've invited or directly enrolled a user, they're going to be allowed access with just their username and password. So in this scenario, you could have a pilot group of 100 users. You have those users added to a group that is going to get added Duo. Those users enroll their devices. Each time they go to log in, they're going to be prompted with Duo based on the policies that you set, and you can gather their feedback. Meanwhile, all other users that you have not added to Duo are invited to enroll. They log in the same way they do today. They go to the same page, they enter the same credentials. Their experience does not change. It's still taking them through the Duo authentication process, but because of this new user policy that says only to prompt users that have been added or enrolled in Duo, they are not going to have their experience change. This allows you to test even if you don't have a dedicated sandbox environment. The flip side of this would be to deny access. And unfortunately, where we usually see this in place is when someone is adding Duo as a remediative step after they believe that they've experienced an incident. In many cases, part of this remediation is trying to restrict access until a user's identity and credentials can be verified by the security team. And in that scenario, you could say, even if a user has valid primary credentials, if I have not enrolled or added them to Duo, do not allow them access, even if they have that valid username and password. You can also have group access policies defined, either groups that are created within Duo or groups that you are importing from Active Directory. You can do user location-based policy, either to allow, to deny, or to always require multi-factor. You can also have a catch-all category, so you can have no action taken on users coming from Canada and United States, which means that it will follow whatever other policy restrictions are in place. And for any other countries, it's going to deny access. Trusted endpoints are going to be corporate managed devices that have been issued with a Duo identifier, a little Duo certificate, so that you can have additional policy restrictions that say only corporate managed devices, maybe these Duo identified endpoints also have a local agent-based endpoint management tool or mobile device management tool installed on it. You can set that in your policy. For web-based authentications, you can choose whether users should be remembered and whether that memory should be for each application that they log into or for all protected web applications. This can be set based on hours or days. For both mobile and desktops, you can choose operating system restrictions. And the nice thing here is that there are dynamic versions updated by Duo so that you don't constantly have to go in and update these. You can use these dynamic settings of less than the latest, up-to-date version, or end-of-life version. And you'll also get a little context clue here on the right side that'll show you what those versions are currently recognized as. If you do have some legacy situations where you can't update past a certain version, no worries. We're going to talk about how you can have some custom policies and then you can choose specific OS versions. You can also choose whether you want to just warn your users or actually block them and how long of a grace period they have to do that update. Along with these version and update prompts, you can allow or block entire OSs, OS categories, as well as browsers to allow or deny access to specific data or specific resources from browsers that you have as preferred or want to exclude, as well as prompting or blocking users for an out-of-date browser. You can, as mentioned, make sure the plugins are up to date or block them. Along with host names, you can have specific allow or deny lists for IP addresses and ranges. You can deny authentication from risky networks. Those could be known anonymous or malicious proxies, Tor endpoints, or unrecognized VPNs. You can limit the authentication methods that are available to your users. So for example, if you want to force out-of-band authentication, you can do that by disabling passcodes or telephony options. You can require that users have an up-to-date version of Duo Mobile, whether or not they can have a tampered or jailbroken device, whether they must have a screen lock in place, whether a device must have full disk encryption, and whether that screen lock must have a biometric option available. That gives you a good baseline. So you've got your global policy. This is going to be applied by default. Anytime you create a new integration, this policy is going to come into play. But not every tool is the same. So let's say that we have a specific ASA policy for any of our ASA gateways so that we can say any user coming to log in must follow additional policy requirements. If I scroll back down here to my global policy, I can see that some of these standards have now been overridden by changes based on the application policy. This allows us to get more granular. Now, getting further granular, within a specific tool, not every user is going to interact with that tool the same way. And so we can actually go as far as applying policies based on groups. And these, again, can be groups that we have created locally within Duo, or more likely that we are managing from our primary identity service or directory service like Active Directory, Azure AD, etc. So creating an application, creating an integration and setting that up within Duo, creating policies to govern that application. We're all set, except now nobody can use it. We actually need to get users enrolled. There's a few different ways that you can enroll users. Starts with the most straightforward, if not the most convenient, to add users manually. So I'm going to add Zoe Lynn 42 because I've got all the answers here. And now I can go through and I can manually set every field that a user would otherwise be able to set up during enrollment or that you could import. I can set alternate user IDs if maybe my Zoe Lynn 42 is my user ID for some services and Zoe Lynn 42 at domain.com is my login elsewhere. Since this is the same actual user, we can add this as an alias. We can add the user real name, email, their status for two-factor, any groups that they're a member of. All of this can be done manually. If you have 2 or more users, I would not recommend this enrollment process. This is really just for sort of initial proof of concept testing, or if you have a home lab that's just you. If you've got a group of users, you're going to use one of the bulk enrollment options. You can either paste a CSV of user IDs and emails, and you can customize the enrollment email that they'll receive, which they'll then click on that link and it will take them through enrolling their device, just like the self-enrollment that you saw. Or you can import an existing CSV that you've exported from another directory or reference point. But by far the most common way is going to be a directory sync. Odds are you're already using LDAP, Active Directory, Azure AD, some tool to manage user identities and groups, work groups within your environment. There's no reason that you should have to duplicate all of that work and management just to have that control in Duo. So we have a simple way that you can add a lightweight software proxy inside your perimeter that is going to send only the information necessary for that secondary auth request. It is not going to transmit the primary credentials that are still validated by Active Directory or by whatever your domain resource is. But after primary authentication, it will then send that information to Duo to complete the second step, as well as allow you to import and manage your users and groups in Duo based on those that you've already created within your home directory. All right, now let's see here. If I go back to our agenda, we talked through authentication methods. We looked at the end user experience. We looked at what is encompassed in device insight, creating and configuring an application, including policies and controls, and enrolling users. I know I went at a pretty quick clip there. Usually we do this presentation about 45 minutes, so I appreciate you bearing with me. And I'd love to open it up to any Q&A that we've gotten.
Absolutely. Yeah, great job, Zoe. I know it was a fast-paced demo, but you went really through it very well, very well. I learned a lot. I learned how thorough the documentation and the CLI examples and the videos are on the Duo website. I was impressed by that. The massive list of supported integrations. I mean, it just went on and on. You kept scrolling through applications and clouds and network infrastructure. That was cool to see. How easy it is to test in production. You talked about that. And how easy it is to get started. So let's see, first comment came in here. They said, nice presentation. Thank you, Pamela.
Thank you.
Another question or comment came in here, and they're asking, does Duo interact with local installs of Outlook? As in, will Outlook, like when someone logs into Outlook, does Duo have anything to do with the authentication of that, or how does that work?
Right, so presently we do not protect authentication for locally installed thick clients with exceptions. There are primarily remote access solutions like VPNs that are client-based that we allow authentication protection for. What you can do is that Duo supports workstation login. So you can implement authentication with a second factor on both Macs and Windows machines. And on Windows, you can actually still enable that even if that device is completely offline by using cached offline login.
Oh, okay. That's very nice. I didn't know that was supported. So that's cool to see. Another question here. What about users who don't want to enroll personal devices?
Oh, yeah, good question. And this is something that we run into as a concern a lot of times when we're talking to folks and helping them through their trial and their pilot process. What we have found through a whole lot of deployments is that oftentimes we will overestimate the scale of this problem, and we can address a lot of the scale of this problem through communication and education. So one of the resources that I would really encourage anyone who is checking out Duo to take a look at is going to be our guide documentation. So this is a end user facing guide to two-factor, pretty comprehensive, going from what two-factor is to exactly what Duo is going to look like for interaction across all of these different platforms and tools, and letting them know exactly what information is being collected on their device. Usually, when users don't want to install something on their device, they're concerned about either or both giving up control or giving up privacy. And we can respond to those concerns because what Duo is gathering doesn't require an agent. We are gathering no additional information beyond the default developer permissions that are available to any application stored on their phone, other than requesting camera access to scan those QR codes. But it doesn't request photos access to have a visibility on them. So installing Duo Mobile isn't going to allow users to have all their pictures deleted, allow their boss to see every text that they send to their mom. Really, all that it's doing is letting us know whether that device is secure enough, is healthy enough for us to allow it access to protected data. Oftentimes, when users understand that, which you can do in the pre-enrollment stage when you're communicating to them and educating them about what to expect, that addresses the issue for the majority of your users. Odds are, especially if you've got a resistant user population, you're probably still going to have some users that may not want to do that. That's fine. That's why we have a variety of factors available. Maybe they have, maybe they have a desk phone. You can have them use that to authenticate. Maybe you can get them a dedicated device that's less expensive than purchasing and maintaining a phone plan, like a YubiKey or a U2F token. And if you're issuing them a laptop, increasingly, as we expand our WebAuth N support, you may be able to have them do that strong device-based authentication right from that device using something like Touch ID. So I would say first, lead with communicating and education. That's going to help address a lot of the problem. And then for those recalcitrant few, you can use another one of the options to get them enrolled.
Okay, very nice. I like that you have user education available. I think that's very smart because I'm sure you're right. That's the users just want to make sure that their personal data isn't, somehow being accessed. And there's also other options available. So that's cool. Another question here. What if you don't allow BYOD?
Oh, yeah. Good question. So this is a tricky question for me because I feel like the question to do you have a BYO environment is for almost every organization, yes, whether we like it or not, right? Because we need to account for the gaps in our security strategy and the potential for shadow IT. If I am a leader and the process for getting a corporate managed device or using the services that require using that managed device are too arduous, if I can scale the difficulty level of a credit card going to a SaaS service where I can just set up a service on a credit card and or log in directly to a corporate managed cloud service by going straight to their login page rather than the internal organizations page for login. If I can do those things, users, even good users, are going to try and take the path of least resistance. You can get in front of that though. If you recognize that users are going to use their devices wherever they can get away with it, you can account for that and build a strategy around it. And you can think about what are the places where I can give users that freedom to have access as long as their devices are healthy and up to date and meet our security policy. And then where do I say, this is a more sensitive resource. We really do need to add these additional controls here. If your users can see that you are building that balance of security and convenience for them and making it easy for them where you are able, they're going to be a whole lot more receptive to those places where you may need to step it up. And the more consistent you can keep that experience across all of those integrations, the better acceptance and adoption your users will have.
Excellent, excellent. Let's see, I know we're running out of time here. Before we go, looks like last question, how do you get started? What was the URL? Can you bring that up again, Zoe?
So we've got, let's swap back here. We do have a 30-day trial that gives you access to try out every edition of our service. Oh, that's one thing that I didn't mention. I'll flip over to what the editions and pricing are in just a moment. But we do have a sign-up page where you can go. You can actually set up a trial account with full access to the service for 30 days. We do have a community edition that you can continue to use after that. But here, if you go to duo.com pricing, we have a pretty transparent structure. We have a few different editions, Duo Free being that community edition that was mentioned, MFA providing the base multi-factor experience, Access providing the detailed device insight and policy control settings, and then Beyond really going for those organizations that are looking to fully mature their zero trust strategy. It allows secure external access to internal applications without requiring the additional layer of the VPN, as well as giving you the ability to have managed and unmanaged devices, as I had mentioned there, as an additional element to build your policy around. So yeah, you can get that started by going to signup.duo.com. And I would invite anyone who has further questions, feel free to reach out. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at DuoZoe, D-U-O-Z-O-E, or I've got one of the easiest email addresses in the world. If you're ready, it's zoe@duo.com.
I love that. That's super easy, whether it's on Twitter or email. I also love the community edition. I need to give that a try for myself. I love the transparent pricing and quick, fast setup. Zoe, I think that's all we have time for, but it's been great having you on the event today.
Wonderful. Thanks so much. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank you, Zoe, and thank you, Duo, for supporting today's live demo of Duo Security. And thank you, everyone out there in the audience, for joining us today on the event. Of course, for more information, visit signup.duo.com. Have a great day.